What it do, Sober Soldier, salute. This is Stick from Dead Prayers with my partner, M1. And you are in tune to gotkushTV.
There was empires in Africa called Kush, Timbuktu, where every race came to get booked. My success to you, even if you wish me the opposite. Sooner or later, we'll all see who the prophet is.
Achomi na jele gbojo kwe ni biane nyenko gotkushTV nyeyiradon. My name is Na Jele Gbojo Kwe, and right now you're watching gotkushTV. Thank you.
Mina bakabusi nengre me fele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre me fele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre me fele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre me fele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre me pele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre
of the things that, we must push, all of us, is this fundamental question of the global nature of our African identities. That we stop, to see ourselves as Nigerians and Gabonese and, Ghanaians and Congolese and all these other nonsensical identities that we have. But not just that we talk about them like we're talking now, but that it's actually, embedded in our spirits, in our psyche, and in our approach to our work. Because those of you, who are on the continent know that we face, this crisis of religion, this crisis of ethnicism that is tearing us apart. And the only solution to that is going to, to start to address things and see things as a global body. And that when we speak of a Federation of African States, we're not just referring to us on the continent, but that we are coming to the table with all of our power. And our power means the millions of Africans in the diaspora. That there's that clarity of understanding. So it's not something we just talk about or we preach about, but that we actually begin to implement.
Mwadi, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Give praises unto our great ancestors, because our ancestors are worthy to be praised. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodie, African power and African liberation for all African people. Greetings, brothers and sisters. I bring you greetings from the auspicious Black Power Pan-African media platform, which is known as gotkushTV. We have a very, very important discussion here for you today. So make sure as you come through, you hit up the like button. Hit up the like button as you come through. If you are not subscribed to gotkushTV, subscribe to gotkushTV and share the link far and wide. Yes, the family, share the link far and wide. Let the people them know, say, Shakara is live right now on gotkushTV discussing South Africa versus Israel at the International Court of Justice. Did South Africa win? We want to know, kings and queens. Did South Africa win the case? Yes, we have to know the answer to that question there, because it appears that there is some confusion about exactly what went down at the ICJ a little while ago. So we are going to delve into it, and I have some powerful guests who are, well disposed, to breaking this down and bringing clarity where there is confusion. We have one of our guests with us thus far. The other will be joining us shortly, I'm sure. So do stay tuned, brothers and sisters. We're there. But yes, indeed. Look more housekeeping. So we've got like up the video, we've got share the link as true, and all of these things. And we also want to encourage you to support gotkushTV if you wish to do so. Pin to the top of your chat, and also featured in the description to this video, you will find a link to our Patreon where you can make a one-off or monthly contribution to the development of gotkushTV as your #1 Pan-African Garveyite Universal African Nationalist media platform based in the UK and transmitting worldwide. So we look forward to your continued support and giving thanks continually for all those who are supporting at the moment. We appreciate you all, and we appreciate you abundantly, brothers and sisters. And so as we develop, we will be getting into producing some of our flagship content. And if you look through our archives and our playlist, you will note some of the shows that we've been producing in the past. And so we want to get back to producing those shows, and your contributions will definitely assist us in being able to do so. All right, so we give thanks, brothers and sisters. We also want to let you know that we do have a new show that is launching next month. For more details, do stay tuned for more details, because we are going to be bringing you
democracy, demonstration of grace, crazy demonstration. If it no be crazy, why for Africa?
Yes, indeed, Kings and Queens. Let me just get it to you one more time.
Democracy, Demonstration of grace. Crazy demonstration. If he no be crazy, why for Africa?
Yes, indeed, family. The election, not the general election in Ghana, is taking place in December. And so from now to then, I will be joined by my brother, Bonchi Anyete, who is based in Accra. And we will be breaking down the politics of Ghana, both historically and contemporarily, in the lead up to the election. And the purpose for doing so is to provide our viewing audience with a snapshot of what politics looks like in the African world, yeah, and there are many parallels. So even though we're focusing on Ghana, you'll find parallels in Nigeria and Congo and South Africa and Jamaica and Haiti and Trinidad and Suriname. So that is the point of that particular show. Do stay tuned for all updates. We will get them to you, so you'll be able to be in tune with the thing. Without further ado, we're not gonna hold up any further, kings and queens. Let you bring in our guest for this evening. First and foremost, let me bring forward the spiritual leader of the Al-Qibla Revivalist movement, who also happens to be my father. Greetings and welcome to Brother Leader Bandaka. Tendai Mwari, Brother Leader.
Tendai Mwari, Brother Shakara. I bring greetings to you and to our beloved and treasured listeners in the most precious, powerful, and bountiful name of our motherland, Al-Qibla and Mama Africa, in the sacred spirits of our most gracious ancestors, and in a prayer for oneness, hope, and prosperity for all African people on the face of Mother Earth, Rumbidzo Kunamwari Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory. Kudzai Mudzimumukuru, give praises unto our great ancestors. Tendai Mwari.
Giving thanks, Brother Leader, giving thanks. And we are also going to introduce our next guest, who is with us, elder, activist, researcher, historian, professor, and all kind of different things, kings and queens. I bring you Elder Cecil Gutsmore. Tendai Mwari, greetings, Elder Cecil. Elder Cecil, can you hear me? It seems Elder Cecil can't hear me. That's unfortunate. Elder Cecil, can you hear me? Something strange I got on this. All right, well, you can see Elder Cecil was here. So, once he works out his technicals, we will get into the thing proper. All right, greetings and welcome, melanated goddess in the building, over there in the US of A. Set Imhotep in the building over there in Trinidad. And I wanna send a special shout out to everybody that I watch from yard and foreign, because one of the things that I'm loving about our development at the moment is that we are growing with an international audience. Yeah, and in fact, I think it's probably about equal at the moment. Like the viewing audience is both based in the UK and all over, the African world. We get viewers from the continent, we get viewers from the Caribbean, we get viewers from the United States. So we give thanks to our international viewing audience, and long may that continue, because that's what it's about, brothers and sisters. You don't know. All right. So, Brother Leader, and I'll repeat this when Elder Cecil is able to return to us. But what we're going to do right now is we'll begin with the proceedings and the court order, and then we'll get into the implications politically and otherwise. Yeah. And so Elder Cecil's back with us. So Elder Cecil, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Nobody can hear you at the moment. So yeah. Okay, good. Okay, Elder Cecil was here. So I'm gonna bring you back forward now. So we introduced you already, but reintroducing Elder Cecil Gutsmore to the proceedings. Greetings,
my brother. Are you hearing me now?
I'm hearing you clearly. Good. Give him thanks. All right. So as I was, pardon me.
The ancestors are working.
100%, and that's quite an admission coming from Elder Cecil, so we give thanks. All right. All right.
You think I have trouble with the ancestors?
No. Well, maybe they're working in the physical, but that's our subject for another time. You know what I mean? We give thanks to spiritual growth. You know what I mean? All right.
Elder Cecil is perfectly in tune with the ancestors. I bear witness.
Thank you, my brother.
Hopefully not too in tune anytime soon. You know what I'm saying?
As in not to join them. That's going too far.
Not to join them too soon. Not to join them too soon.
I'm with you both on that one.
All right, give thanks. All right. So, brothers and sisters, as I was explaining, elder sister, brother leader, what we'll do is we'll deal with the actual court proceedings and the court order first, and just explain that to our people, and then we'll delve into the geopolitical implications of the thing. Yeah, make sense? Yeah. All right. So first and foremost, there appears to be as a result of some sketchy and sparse media coverage, there appears to be some confusion in the African community as to exactly what went down. Yeah. Possibly if you are in South Africa itself, you might not be a victim of this because South African media has covered this thing quite extensively. But from anybody can go first. Just give our viewers an idea of exactly what led up to this court hearing and what jurisdiction South Africa had in order to bring it to the International Court of Justice at this stage.
Please, brother leader.
Okay, Tendai Mwari. I would have been more than happy for my elder Cecil to go first on this. I'm happy for you to go first, Elder Cecil, but
all right,
if you insist.
No, let's in all mutuality, I'll go first then. Everybody will know that Israel is an occupation of Palestine. Let in 1918 and fundamentally given a part of Palestinian land in 1948, in which moment they excluded, as in drove out, in the region of 800,000+ Palestinians. In a subsequent war, they captured a big part of the Palestinian lands and have been involved in illegal settlement occupation there for a time, and are still doing so now more than ever. There's another part of Palestine called the Gaza Strip, which came back into Israeli possession as a result of the outcome of a war that Egypt was involved in. Thereafter, Israelis settled that territory, and then they left it about 12 to 15 years ago, boasting that they had given up a piece of Palestinian territory. They expected the Palestinians to be entirely quiescent. Of course, they weren't, because they're an occupied people, a conquered people, and every such people have a right to maximum self-defense. Unlike occupiers who in law do not. And Israel, as an occupied power, even though they have been using the claim to a right of self-defense, in fact, in international law, as occupiers, they have no such right. As everybody would know, if you think about Germany during the Second World War, when they were in occupation of France, all of the French people had the right, which they exercised as a national self-defense force, to fight the Germans. Now, so Hamas, which is said to be an organization that the Israelis helped to create, and there's clearly some truth in that, but they came to be in charge of Gaza and have resisted ever since. That, it was the Israeli intention anyway, but they've turned Gaza into an outdoor concentration camp. It's completely blockaded. When they left 12 or 13 or 15 years ago, the first thing that they did was to explode the two power stations. So Gaza has no mains electricity. They block sea and land, and they control entry and exit from Gaza, and terribly impoverished place, hardship ridden, high unemployment, and so on. So the Palestinian people have a right to resist. on the 7th of
October.
To the surprise of everybody, including to the surprise of Israel, they launched an extraordinary attack on Israeli territory. It is said that in the region of 1,300 people were killed in that. All of that is blamed on Hamas and other fighting forces of the Palestinian people. In fact, a lot of the people killed on that day were killed by the Israelis as their forces sought to regain control over a situation which they've had lost control of because they underestimated the Palestinian people. They were not supposed to do what they did on that day, which included, it's not just civilians that they killed, not that settler civilians have, not that there are any innocent settler civilians, but it's not just civilians that they killed on that day. A large number, in the region, I think of about 300 Israelis were killed, Israeli army people were killed, because as part of the way the Israelis are managing settlement, they neglected the Gaza border and pulled troops that should have been on the Gaza border into the West Bank as part of a suppression and occupation campaign which had been going on. Up until the point of the 7th of October, in the region of 200 Palestinians had been killed in the West Bank by settlers and Israeli army people up until, I say, that date in October. So there's been terrible oppression of Palestinian people going right back, effectively from 1918. The British, as the rulers of that territory, killed, the figures are not in my head, but big numbers of Arab Palestinians who resisted the taking away of their land, which the Britain was not entitled to do. So how have the Israelis responded since the 7th of October? With American weaponry, which was sent in abundance. On the day of the day after, the President of the United States flew to Israel, hugged up the Israeli Prime Minister, who everybody knows is the most monstrous of persons with a long record of monstrosity.
That's right.
That is the man that the President of the United States went and hugged up. He sent all the weapons that they could conceivably need, including 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs, plus. He sent 2 naval task force units, one to the Eastern Mediterranean and the other one to the Red Sea. They're still there. And that one in the region of the Red Sea is the one that they're using against the Hutu resistance in Yemen. Now, the operation that the Israelis have mounted against Gazans on the grounds that they're defending themselves, in international, their friends who are complicit in what has turned out to be a terrible genocide have said that they have a right to self-defense. Let us say for a moment that that is true. That absolutely does not entitle you to do any of the things that the Israelis have done. It does not entitle you to threaten the death of civilians and tell them to move, otherwise we're going to kill you in a certain period of time. All of the Gazan population has been shifted from where they lived since the 7th of October. When the Israelis threatened to bomb, first of all, it was to the north and east of the Gaza Strip. 1 million people who lived in Gaza City, the capital, and elsewhere in that territory moved south. Israel said that down there would be safe. It has subsequently, and even at that time, turned out not to be safe because their bombing campaign and their military operation comes from land, sea, and air. And it is terrible. More bombs have been dropped. The figures are not in my head, but the figures are available all over the place. More bombs have been dropped on Gaza, which is a small place. It's 25 miles by 5 miles, than the Americans used in Iraq for the whole of that very long war. And it's more bombs than were used in many other campaigns. On the Palestinian figures, in the region of, it may now be more than the 25,000 I'm about to mention, but in the region of 26,000 people have been killed, most of them women and children. Not that the Israelis have any right to kill Palestinian men. And in addition to that, thousands, in the region of 70 or 80,000, have been injured, grievously injured. The Israelis have attacked hospitals, schools, flattened universities, all civilian infrastructure, housing estates, and so on, have been flattened, pushing the Gaza people further and further south. And what they intend to do is to force them to leave Gaza. Today's report is that they are now using seawater allegedly to flood tunnels. Everybody knows they've been advised that if they do that, it's likely to poison the water table under Gaza and make the Gazans who are entitled to stay there and who I hope do not leave because, So that generally is the background. A murderous genocide, and genocide simply means the destruction in part or in whole of a people. So now it is on that basis that South Africa is a member of the international community, registered with rights of access to the international court that has brought an action through the International Criminal Court. No, the International Court of Justice. There are two UN courts, not the criminal court, the one that they've tried lots of Africans and some former Yugoslavs, whatever they're now called. In The Hague. So South Africa brought this case, and what does it allege? It alleged that all of the evidence, which is of two kinds, confirms that there is a case for Israel to answer. First of all, a case relating to the intent to commit a genocide. And there is so much evidence of that kind from the Israeli president, from Israeli prime ministers, from Israeli defense ministers, and many other cabinet ministers that have been declaring that the Palestinians are not people, they're human animals, and are there to be destroyed, and they've set about destroying them. Something like 1% of the population have been killed or injured. So the genocidal intent was and is easy to prove on the basis of declarations, verbal and written declarations by members of the Israeli ruling circle. So that was a part of the case, the evidence that the South Africans, acting, I believe, properly and in the interest of humanity, certainly of African humanity, certainly of Arab humanity, brought. The second part was that as soon as you start to look at what the Israelis have been doing in Gaza since about the 7th or 8th of October last year, that it fits the definition of genocide to a T and beyond. So to a double T, right? It fits the definition. And the South Africans asked the court to demand of Israel an immediate ceasefire. The court did not agree to that, but what it has done is issue a declaration in a number of parts, including one that says to the Israelis, do not destroy any evidence of what you have been doing.
Right.
And secondly, come to us within a month with the evidence that would go to show that you haven't been doing what, on all of the evidence in front of us, that's the court. And that's the court deciding something like 17-1 or 17-2 in all of the matters on which they have decided.
Right.
One of the judges who voted against a court.
Elder Cecil, when you're ready, I can assist with the specifics of that.
Wonderful. Just to vary voices, come in, please.
Go ahead, Robert, because I was going to do that, but you do it. So yeah, go ahead.
No problem. Tendai Mwari. First of all, let me just hail Elder Cecil for that excellent summary that he has given us as to the background to why the situation is where it's at now. It's important that we understand that life in Gaza didn't begin on the 7th of October, nor did the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis did not begin on the 7th of October. So that historical background is extremely important. Just a couple of details I want to add to that. As I said, excellent backdrop that we've had from our elder Cecil, an intellectual colossus in our community, and we give thanks.
Have your little joke, my brother.
I'm sorry?
I said, have your little joke, as you must.
No, that's not a joke. Our colossal intellectual entity in our community, a tremendous source of knowledge and information for us all. I make that point very, very seriously.
Let's not distract us without
love
of each other. But
it's not a distraction either. I want the viewers to know they're in very, very safe hands. Those who may not know. Tendai Mwari. So let me just add a couple of details to what we have already received from Elder Cecil, and that is where Elder Cecil says that the Israelis were given the land of the Palestinians in 1948. 1948 was the year when it was made official that the state of Israel should be established as a nation state on the land of the Palestinians. But of course, the process actually started with, as Elder Cecil is of course aware, started with the Balfour Declaration, which is a little document, a letter that was written by one Arthur Balfour, who was then Foreign Minister of the United Kingdom, to one Baron Rothschild, who was then regarded to be the head of the Jewish community, and certainly one of the heads of the then Zionist Confederation of Britain and Ireland. So, and it's important that that context is also very, very important. But we'll come back to that later, I'm sure. So it's important we know it started from then, and the process of mass influx of Israelis into Palestine started about 5 years later, around about the early 1920s, when Israelis, Jews were being moved into. Yes, go ahead.
Brother Leader, may I make a small point? This is important.
Sure.
That Balfour Declaration document, which the British, having just conquered Turkish territory, weren't entitled to give to anybody. That's agreed. But importantly, in that document, the British knew and actually say in that document that what they are saying they want to see happen shouldn't happen, and for two reasons. One, because it shouldn't happen at the expense the human rights and other rights of the existing population. One, and two, that it shouldn't happen if it harmed the interests of Jews living in neighboring Arab countries. Now, neither of those provisos was met. And so the Balfour Declaration, even though it's this clear declaration on behalf of the British government, it also sets out the reason why it shouldn't happen. That is to say, it was bound to injure the rights of the existing Arab Palestinian population and bound to affect Jews in the neighboring territories, all of which has happened. And since then, because the Palestinians have resisted, when the British were held something called the Mandate under the League of Nations, they defended the Jews to whom they'd given the land by effectively and very brutally crushing Arab revolts against what they found happening to them, which is that their land was being taken away by the effectively colonizing British power.
Yeah.
Continue. I was going to come back to to this later on, but since Elder Cecil made that intervention, I've got the Balfour Declaration in front of me. It's 67 words. It's very short, 67 words. So I'll read it, if that's okay. And you will see it will illuminate what Elder Cecil has just shared with us. Now, remember, we said that this is a letter from the Foreign Minister of the UK to Baron Rothschild, and it says, "Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet." And by the way, the Prime Minister then was David Lloyd George.
Yes.
And he apparently was a Zionist, a strong Zionist sympathizer himself. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil. This is what Elder Cecil was emphasizing just now. Nothing may be done. Sorry, I've lost my. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country.
Yeah.
Then the last sentence, which is very interesting, the last sentence in the letter is, "I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation." So Arthur Balfour is writing to Lord Rothschild.
Yes.
And he's writing to Lord Rothschild as a representative of the British Federation of the British Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Great Britain and Ireland, which is very interesting. And we may ask the question, why is he writing to Lord Rothschild? Well, we need to understand the powerful role of the Zionist movement. And we need to understand that Lord Rothschild was also part of the Rothschild banking family that had bankrolled Britain's involvement, had bankrolled Britain's involvement in World War I, had bankrolled Britain's so-called compensation to the enslavers of our ancestors, the 20 million that the British government paid to the enslavers of our ancestors was bankrolled by the same Rothschild family, the same Rothschild family who bankrolled Britain's role in the Battle of Waterloo against what's his name? Bonaparte. Napoleon. Yeah. So it's a very powerful, a financially powerful family who was central and integral in the establishment of the Zionist movement. They were bankrolling the Zionist movement. I think that context is also important. Please do come in, LSS.
I make this a little point on the Rothschilds.
Sorry, Elder. So after this, I do want to bring it back up to date slightly,
Okay.
for the sake of time. Yeah, but go ahead, Elder. Go ahead.
Telling our people the longer historical story does absolutely no harm. So just one final point.
Go ahead.
That aspect of the history. The Rothschilds, we actually know them in another context, historical context of ours. They're the ones who organized when the Haitians said to the French, who said to the Haitians immediately after the Haitian Revolution, we want you to compensate our slave owners that you've taken away their thing from.
Yes.
The Haitians said, go away. We don't, and then they said, we don't have any money. And the French said, don't worry, we'll find the money and lend you the money. And the people who arranged the loan were none other than the European Jewish bankers Rothschild. And they're the ones who raised the 90 million francs to compensate the slave owners at 5% compound interest. But additionally, they took 1/6 of that 90 million as extra compensation for raising the loan. It's unheard of thievery.
Yes.
You know, it's like you're going to your bank and they arrange a mortgage for you. And in addition to charging you an interest, they say, we're going to take a big percentage. 6% is a whole heap of, it's more than 6. It's actually 1/6 of the capital that they took, which is well over 6%. 6%. So the Rothschilds, we know as part of the Jewish role in our historic oppression, leaving aside their presence in the spread of the enslavement of our ancestors from out of northern Brazil into the rest of northern South America, and then out into the Caribbean islands, to which they were absolutely central.
Give thanks for that, Elder Cecil, brother leader. And just to say a couple points of detail based upon what you both said. Currently, America is in the midst of giving Israel $3.8 billion a year in military aid alone, and the figure that in additional military aid that was announced by the White House, I believe it was in November last year, it's to the tune of an additional 14.5 billion in response, in order to fund its expedition in Gaza at the moment. It's also worth noting that the loan that you mentioned in relation to in Haiti was being paid by Haiti up until, I believe, 1947. 1947. Yeah, and the loan that was mentioned in relation to the enslavers of our ancestors from Britain was being paid back by us. Until
2015, I believe.
Until 2015, which is but 9 years ago. 9 years ago, depending on exactly when it was concluded. So the descendants of those enslaved Africans were paying back that money to these banks. At that time, it's also worth noting. I'm just going to read actually.
Shakara, bear with me 1 second, please.
Okay, Brother Leader, no problem. All right, so Brother Leader will be back with us. So to bring it back up to date now. As Elder Cecil has said, Israel and South Africa are signatories to the International Court of Justice. All signatories to the International Court of Justice have a responsibility and a duty to act in situations whereby they believe that a nation may be in the process of committing the crime of genocide, to call that nation to account. And so that is the context in which South Africa brings this case. Tune in to last week's show, Zivanai show, if you want some historical background in terms of the relationship between South Africa and Israel, and the extent to which Israel was a funder, a supporter of the criminal settler colonial white supremacist the apartheid government in South Africa to the point of ensuring that they were able to secure a nuclear arsenal. We won't go into that whole history today because we went into it last week. All right, we don't worry. If you want to touch it, you can do. But I'm not just letting everyone know that we did a video on it last week, so you can go watch that. Yeah, that's the context in which that happened. Now I'm going to read the main points that were being brought before the court. Yeah, and by the way, all of these proceedings are online. You can watch them. But in relation to the judgment, the court order, the main headlines, in the court order were prima facie or facie jurisdiction, them big Latin word there, and the standing of South Africa,
which simply means prima facie means on the face of it.
Yes, on the face of things. What is that which is apparent? Give thanks, brother leader. So the standing of South Africa, the rights whose protection is sought, and the link between such rights and the measures requested, and then the risk of irreparable prejudice and urgency. So in short, the court had to establish its jurisdiction to hear the case and adjudicate on the case. It had to establish that South Africa has the right to bring the case in the first place. It had to establish the what exactly South Africa is asking to be done, and whether they have the right to enforce such or adjudicate on such measures, and they were also establishing whether there is in fact a risk of what Israel is doing, causing irreparable damage to the people of Gaza. Those are the 5 major points, that were being heard.
And that there is actually a dispute in law between Israel and South Africa. That also they found to be the case.
I believe that point is under the point about jurisdiction, prima facie jurisdiction.
All those points are important because Israel did mount a challenge to the authenticity of South Africa bringing the case against Israel, that there was no jurisdiction.
Stick a pin, brother. Stick a pin. We're gonna come to that. Yeah. Before we get to that, I watched the full proceedings on the first day. Had to go to YouTube because BBC decided to them now stream the thing live. As did Sky News. All right, but just give me your impressions upon and takeaways from watching South Africa's case as it was brought on the first day, which I believe was the 11th of January.
Just before we do that, Brother Chakara, if I may, just one more detail I wanted to add to Elder Cecil's opening, if I may, which I think is important, where Elder Cecil made reference to the occupation of Gaza and that the Israelis left the Israeli settlers left Gaza some 15 years ago. In fact, it was in 2005 that they left Gaza. But what they did was that they had dismantled the settlements in Gaza. But what they did was they mounted a blockade around Gaza. So they never actually left Gaza. They did dismantle the settlements, some 8,000 to 9,000 people who were illegally settling in Gaza itself. And this is against international law that they had established those settlements in Gaza. But when they removed those settlements, what they did was they established a blockade around Gaza, where they controlled everything that went out, everything that came in. They controlled the water, they controlled the food, they controlled medicine, they controlled everything that went in and out, including people, the migration of people. You know, if someone wanted to go from Gaza to the West Bank, for example, it was like going to a different country. You needed permission to leave that enclave. And oftentimes permission would be refused. If you wanted to go and see a relative, a friend, you know, whatever, you wanted to go for medical treatment, oftentimes you wanted to go to a particular hospital for medical treatment and were refused. They were still controlling Gaza. They were still present. Their presence was still felt by Gaza, in Gaza. There was still 100%. A dominant force in Gaza.
Which is why they have been referred to this day as an occupying force. To be clear, just to also add, brother leader, I do believe that the technical terminology for what you just described is the free market. I do believe that's the technical terminology for what you just outlined.
I guess so. I guess you might sort of in there somewhere.
You know, I'm absolutely playing. Go ahead.
May I just make a little additional point? The ruthlessness with which brother leader is right about that, but in addition to that, the ruthlessness with which they enforced the blockade by sea. There was an attempt on one occasion, perhaps 3 or 4 years into the blockade, post Israel taking out its settlers. Some Muslim people, with Turkey's help, tried to break the blockade with, I think, 2 or 3 ships. I actually know somebody who was on that attempted blockade running operation. And the Israelis attacked those ships and killed some of the people on them. And just turned them back. So it has not been possible for ships, indeed fishing off the coast of Gaza is controlled by the Israelis. So when their ambassador here says, and I heard her say this on the 3rd or 4th day in, that they do not occupy Gaza because they left. The control that they exercise over Gaza is exactly as Brother Leader just described, and worse. And in the moment when they left, the destruction of that they inflicted, including wrecking the 2 power stations that supplied mains electricity, is just part of how awful.
I mean, unbelievably, the extent to which they micromanaged migration and import and export in Gaza. Crazy. To the extent that they controlled the amount of calories that they allowed, the amount of calories that they allowed to enter Gaza. They had something called Starvation Plus, where they allowed sufficient food into Gaza. They calculated the amount of people in Gaza and the amount of food that they would need to keep them above starvation. Starvation Plus.
And since our young brother wants to move on to the current state of affairs,
please.
The link that we can make there is that since the 7th of October, they have closed all but one, and now 2 of the entry points into Gaza, both from Egypt. And the amount of, under the pre-existing arrangements for letting food and other material into Gaza, all of which was directly supervised, everything was looked at. But something like 500 trucks per day, big lorries, were going in. Since 7th of October, less than 100 per day have been let in. If the 500 represented the starvation or sub-starvation or just above starvation conditions that were imposed on the Palestinian people, imagine what reducing that by, would it be 80%? The impact that has had in a situation where the Palestinians have been driven from their bakeries, from their farmlands, etc. So that aspect of the genocide, really does matter, and
Yes.
it takes us to the fact that the UN agency, that actually the one effectively surviving agency delivering food into particularly northern Gaza, that the Israelis have alleged that 12 of now about 13,000 people work for this UN agency. The Israelis have alleged that 12 of them participated in the 7th of October matter. Even
we're going to come back to that issue. Stick a pin. We're going to come back to that issue. Yeah.
But even, yes. I'm back into your hands.
We're definitely going to come back to that issue. All right. So stay tuned. And I just wanted to get your sense of the quality of the case that was brought by South Africa and how it was presented. What was your impression of the case itself? Go ahead.
I think that it was excellently presented. But I have to say, and we as Africans sometimes are surprised that we have competent people amongst us. I mean, so the South Africans have good, bright lawyers, and good, bright South African lawyers did the presentation. The case that they had to present is so strong that even had it been badly presented, it would still have been massively convincing. Because the genocidal intent of the Israeli state and their backers in the West, especially the United States of America, the president, the head of the U.S. Army, and their chief foreign minister, all of them have made declarations that amount to intent to commit genocide. And then the facts of the genocide, starting with the intensification of the blockade on the first day, the 7th, water was cut off, food was cut off, medicines were cut off, etc., 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 and anything that you can imagine apart from military equipment for the Israeli army was cut off on that day, as in totally cut off. And what was then started illegally under international law was the collective punishment of an entire population. Bombs from the air, howitzers and tanks and other field guns, and howitzers and battleship guns from off the coast, all were turned on Gaza, attacking all infrastructure, attacking housing, attacking schools, attacking hospitals, and in the process necessarily killing, but unnecessarily killing people in a very deliberate kind of a way. So the evidence that the South Africans marshaled, and they did it very well and presented it expertly, is what persuaded the court. I think it worth saying that the court appeared to me, in coming to the conclusion about the South African case, to have sought evidence of its own in relation to what's happening. And some of what was read out as the judgment referred to stuff that hadn't been mentioned by the South Africans and that indeed had occurred since the initial presentation.
I noticed that you and by the way, Elder Cecil was referring to the statement that was read out before as a part of the order by President Donahue, the president of the International Court of Justice. I had the same observation. Probably anything to add on the subject of the quality of the case that was brought by South Africa?
Yeah, Tendai Mwari, I too, like Elder Cecil, thought it was a formidable submission to the court. I thought the case presented itself because there are two aspects to that South Africa must demonstrate to the court, which is that the actions of Israel in itself, is genocidal. You have to look at the actions itself, and that must constitute genocide. And then you must prove intent. You have to be able to prove that not only is the action genocidal, but there is intent on the part of the Israeli government to commit this genocide. If you can't prove intent, then the ICJ would not have grounds to uphold the case. And I thought South Africa did brilliantly in outlining the case as far as the egregious genocidal actions of Israel is concerned, some of which Elder Cecil has already spoken to. 25, nearly 26,000 people slaughtered, killed. Some 7,000 are estimated to still be on the rubble. 70% of these casualties, 70% of the deaths are women and children. Bear in mind that 50% of Gaza is said to be populated by children. They talked about children suffering amputations without anesthetic.
And children being born to mothers without anesthetic.
Children being born to mothers without any form of anesthetic, without any form of antiseptics. They're doing
cesarean without anesthesia and all kind of different.
And all of that.
When
you think 63,000 injured people, at least 63,000. When you think, in addition to that 23 of the 36 hospitals in Gaza has been razed to the ground or otherwise rendered dysfunctional, whilst you are bombing the people, killing people, injuring people, you are destroying their hospitals, refugee camps where people go for refuge, people go for safety. You're bombing these refugee camps. You bomb schools, you bomb buildings where people, you bomb churches, you bomb mosques where people. Go ahead, Ellis.
Most of the refugee camps are UN institutions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The amount of journalists that had been killed. 152. You hear the propaganda about UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, where now they're spreading this propaganda that there are 12 of their staff who were found to have been involved in the October 7th massacre. But what they don't tell you is that 152, no less, 152 UNRWA workers have been killed in the wanton bombing of Gaza. We don't hear that from the mainstream media. But all of this were put in front of the court. 360,000 homes being bombed, being destroyed or damaged by the bombing, and 1.7 million people. Now remember, the population of Gaza
2.2
is 2.3 million. 2.3 million people. 1.7 million people have been displaced. In fact, from the moment the announcement was made that the Israelis had demanded that the Gazans of the north must move to the south, 1.1 million people within 24 hours. I was saying, and I said it on Galaxy Radio, that in itself is an act of genocide. Genocide was announced from the outset. Once they said 1.1 million people had to be moved from north to south within 24 hours. You can imagine there are Okay, you may have able-bodied people who would still find it difficult to transport 1.1 million people within 24 hours. You are creating a genocidal condition there, or precondition. And when you think about people with children, pregnant women, people who are ill, people who are mentally ill, people who are in hospital dying, the elderly, elderly people, the infirm. How are you going to move 1.1 million people to safety within 24 hours? Yeah. So the precondition for genocide was established from the outset. All these and more facts were placed in front of the court. Yeah. The fact that 250 people a day are dying from these wretched bombs. That children, and remember, half of those, 70% of those are women and children. That up to 10 children a day, it's reached a stage now where 10 children a day are experiencing amputations with, as we said, without anesthetic. I'm emphasizing now that in that context, there are 10 children a day that are going through this experience. So when all of that was put before the court, that was certainly compelling evidence. And then the South African government was able to rely not only on these facts and statistics, but they were able to rely upon UN personnel, like the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General, who had traveled to Gaza and who had come back 2 or 3 or 4 times, each time giving a woeful report of what is happening on the ground that was getting worse, and that the humanitarian crisis was mounting, people are dying, and that he was concerned about the capacity to recover this situation whenever the bombings would end. There were those reports from UN personnel. Then in addition to that, in terms of intent, they were able to quote leading
members of the Israeli government
officials, government officials, like the president, the prime minister, the defense minister, the national security minister. They were able to quote them making genocidal comments, saying things like that there are no innocent people in Gaza. They must assume that all of them are guilty. Blatant statements, blatant genocidal statements that were being made publicly. And they were able to connect those statements. Those statements also are similar statements in the mouths of military heads, military generals, and in the mouths of foot soldiers, showing where the intent is being transmitted from the government level to the head of the military, to the ordinary foot soldiers. I thought it was a brilliant, as I said, submission from brilliant submissions from the South African government, and I thought it was a very, very compelling and formidable case.
Elder Cecil, your camera seems to have gone black. Are you still with us? Okay, I can see you're muting and unmuting. We can't hear you either. So you may need to. It seems that you can hear us, so you may need to leave and come again, Elder Cecil, because we can't see you and we can't hear you at the moment. All right. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, but yeah. All right, we're going to continue. Just two points to add. I think in relation to what Brother Leader just said, one of the things that was able to be done, the first brother, and I'm forgive me because I'm forgetting everybody's name, but who began the submission, was able to link President Netanyahu's statement where he evoked Amalek, which is a biblical reference where God instructed the people then for God, the Israelites, to go and kill everything,
and wipe out
pitney dog, cackle, everything
in Amalek,
Yeah. And he made this statement to the Israeli people, and there's a video that Israeli army soldiers uploaded, I believe, on TikTok, where they are chanting and making reference to Amalek in the chant. I thought that was that was very effective. Elder Cecil back with us.
Yeah.
And then raise the camera slightly, please, Elder Cecil.
Yes.
All right. So, and then another aspect of it, what I thought was very effective was the last in the battle lineup, I believe it was. I forget his name again, but it was a British one. Yeah, and basically he seemed to have, or they seemed to have predicted Israel's arguments and rebutted them before they were made. So the issue of jurisdiction, the issue of the existence of a dispute was already in South Africa's submission before Israel even made the case. So I'll bring you to that point now in terms of just assessing what you saw of the case that Israel itself made. My assessment, I'll tell you up front, it seemed to me that their strongest points were procedural rather than substantive in relation to the actual evidence that was brought against them by South Africa. What was your assessment of this?
My own view is that Israel had no case, and so they didn't make a case. Right. What they thought to do, as you correctly say, is to say that the court had no jurisdiction, to say that they were acting on their right to self-defense, and that for the court to go with what South Africa was arguing would leave them at the mercy of Hamas, who had not yet been destroyed. That was the in effect and in fact the Israeli case, and it can be no case when what you are being, it can be no answer, no defense when what you're being accused of is on the evidence of your own conduct, a genocide. Against, in respect of which there's a specific international statute to which you signed up, and against which you're manifestly acting contrarily.
I would add to that. I'll underscore that and add that they also tried to impugn the character and the motive of South Africa. By arguing that they were in league with Hamas, that which is a terrorist group, a genocidal terrorist group itself, who attempted to effectively commit genocide, and who have a policy of committing genocide against Israel. So that's the angle that they tried to use to impugn the character and the motive of South Africa. Obviously, it did not work. It fell flat on its face. And I agree with Elder Cecil. They did not have a case. They expertly scraped the bottom of the barrel. And it clearly did not work for them, because the point which they made about jurisdiction or non-jurisdiction and non-dispute, and therefore requesting that effectively they were seeking to have the case thrown out.
Which is quite a typical legal strategy.
It's a common legal strategy, yes. And as I said, they had to go down the procedural line where that was concerned. But clearly it did not work. It wasn't accepted by the court. Tendai Mwari.
Brothers and sisters, we are speaking to Elder Cecil and Brother Leader Bandaka in relation to the recent court hearing that was brought by South Africa against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Now, I know lawyers in this world. I know a liar, you know. We said them until recently, them never know nothing about the International Court of Justice. Yeah, we're quite familiar as African people who follow any kind of politics with the International Criminal Court, but the International Court of Justice seems to be less well used. Yeah, and so there are even lawyers in this country who are not necessarily too familiar with it. Yeah, but we're going to get onto that.
Perhaps, Brother Shakara, sorry to interrupt you. We should clarify for the viewers the difference between the ICC and the ICJ, because I know
Excellent
some
point.
people,
Go ahead.
yeah, I know some people are confused about this.
Go ahead.
Simply that the ICC is a criminal court that tries individuals,
Yeah,
and the ICJ is a court that tries states, nation states.
Yeah.
That is,
and that's an excellent point as well, in the sense of the fact that because Palestine is not a state, Gaza is not a state, whatever crimes Israel accuses the Hamas of cannot be brought within the jurisdiction of the court, because in Palestine is not recognized as a state. Yeah. So that's an essential point to include in this as well. Brothers and sisters, if you want to ask questions, a few of you have already, I will get to them. Please at gotkushTV in the chat, and we will get your questions to and or comments to Elder Cecil and Brother Leader Bandaka. I'm going to do a couple things now. I'm going to read a couple excerpts from the order that was read out by President of the ICJ, Judge Donahue. Just to give the evidence for what Brother Leader and Elder Cecil have said already. And so one of the points that they made was that since South Africa has invoked as the basis of the court's jurisdiction the compromissory clause of the Genocide Convention, the court must also ascertain at the present stage of the proceedings whether it appears that the acts and omissions complained of by the applicant are capable of falling within the scope of the convention ratione materiae. Yeah. And we'll get back to that in a second, because they must try into Latin word in the legalese. It continues at another point. The court finds that the above mentioned elements are sufficient at this stage to establish prima facie the existence of a dispute between the parties relating to the interpretation, application, or fulfillment of the Genocide Convention. So what that means is that whilst South Africa were arguing that there's grounds for throwing out the case based upon the non-existence of a dispute between South Africa and Israel, the court finds that there is a dispute. It goes on. South Africa contends that Israel has also violated other obligations under the Genocide Convention, including those concerning conspiracy to commit genocide, direct and public incitement to genocide, attempted genocide, and complicity in genocide. Now, this is very important. At the present stage, the proceedings, the court is not required to ascertain whether any violations of Israel's obligations under the Genocide Convention have occurred. Such a finding could be made by the court only at the stage of the examination of the merits of the present case. As already noted, at this stage of making an order on a request for the indication of provisional measures, the court's task is to establish whether the acts and omissions complained of by the applicant appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. And so in light of the foregoing, the court concludes that prima facie, it has the jurisdiction pursuant to this and so forth article. The court concludes prima facie that South Africa has standing. We've already established that already. At this stage, and then again, at this stage of proceedings, however, the court is not called upon to determine definitively whether the rights which South Africa wishes to see protected exist. It need only decide whether the rights claimed by South Africa and for which it is seeking protection are plausible. Moreover, a link must exist between the rights whose protection is sought and the provisional measures being requested. And I read one more section. 1 second. Hold on there. So it says, the court considers that by their very nature, at least some of the provisional measures sought by South Africa are aimed at preserving the plausible rights it asserts on the basis of the Genocide Convention in the present case, namely the right of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts mentioned in article, and it mentions the article and so on and so forth. Yeah, so that's some of the findings. I'm going to do one more thing on the session, then I'm going to come to you. And so based upon all of that, a certain number of instructions were given to Israel that they must carry out if they are to be in line with international law in these matters. The first is that Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of the UN Convention on Genocide. Point number 2, ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any acts described in point number 1 above. 3, Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent the punishment and prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. 4, take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. 5, take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the prevention of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of related articles in the Genocide Convention. That means that they can't destroy any evidence that would be relevant to further investigation. And finally, 6, submit a report. Israel is required to submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month as from the date of this order, which will be the 26th of February. Okay. So I've read out the order in brief. Feel free to draw any other excerpts that you think are relevant, but just what are the implications of this order as it stands, Elder Cecil, brother leader? Go ahead.
By all means, Elder Cecil, if you will, can speak to the implications. I just want to add to this, the provisional measures that you've read out just now, Brother Shakara, that in point 1, the president of the court, Donahue, did also read out the Genocide Convention.
Yes.
The definition of genocide according to the Genocide Convention. And it says any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, A, killing members of the group. This is the case in substance that South Africa brought against Israel, subject to the Genocide Convention. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculating to bring about the physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And that's Article 2. Article 3 says, it says the following shall be punishable. A, genocide. B, conspiracy to commit genocide. C, direct and public incitement to commit genocide. D, attempt to commit genocide. E, complicity in genocide. And I just want to say that last point in particular. That I think that draws in that point about complicity draws in nations like the United States of America, Britain, France, Germany, and other nations that have been actively supporting Israel in the
Agreed.
murderous genocide behavior in Gaza.
Agreed. Don't worry. Now, just to put into context, one of the things that South Africa was looking for was a ceasefire. The court did not order a ceasefire on this occasion, which has led for some propaganda to suggest that they found in favor of Israel. Could you put that into context for us, Elder Cecil, in relation to the implications of
remember, there was another point you wanted Elder Cecil to put into context as well, Brother Shakara.
Let me just go. I
thought it was important, so I don't want it to be forgotten.
Which point was this? Sorry,
something to be clarified. You wanted a response to the provisional measures and the
that's what I'm going to address.
Okay.
The interpretation that this was a finding against South Africa because the court didn't order a ceasefire misses the point that all of the items which the court itemized and which you just read out, killing, bodily harm, destructive actions against, preventing birth, and so on, all of those would cease and should cease under the provisions advanced by the court. And so were Israel to respond as it should properly, cease the killings, which it hasn't. It's been killing 600 or something daily since this judgment. So in fact, the way the court approached it effectively prevents Israel from continuing the prima facie genocidal conduct, which the court has provisionally not found it to be engaged in. But when it looks at what it's doing, it's impossible, even before properly investigating, not to order it to cease and desist from this range of forbidden measures under the Genocide Convention, namely killing, imposing bodily harm, destructive action, prevention of birth, and one or two others. I think that one of the strengths of the South African case, and it was very strongly presented, was just how much what we call homework, legal homework, they'd done beforehand. And so their case was extraordinarily strong in relation to matters of genocidal intent. They found statement after statement from all levels of Israeli society, beginning with the president. So this wasn't just right-wingers making statements. Army Ed,
foot soldiers,
Attorney General, foot soldiers, the president. So right from the beginning, and and then so conspiracy, intent, genocidal intent, and incitement. And on the incitement matter, the South African presentation was also extraordinarily strong, because much of what has been said and is still being said by Israeli personnel, senior ones, middle ones, and ones at the bottom of the society, represent incitement. The stuff that you were relating to, where they brought this biblical case, biblical matter of Amlak or whoever, and they had gone back and cited that, and field commanders were using that in briefings to soldiers. So the incitement, the intent, and the conspiracy to genocide were incredibly well presented in a well documented and well argued way. So that was one of the more impressive aspects of the South African presentation, in my view.
Yes. All right, and the issue of a ceasefire, the South African government minister of foreign affairs, I do believe, Dr. Naledi Pandor, who was at the case, the hearing, said that on the issue of ceasefire, that basically it's her opinion that for Israel to basically enact any of the orders that were given by the court, they would have to enforce a ceasefire.
That's effectively what I just said. That the killings, the bodily harm, the mental and physical damage, the prevention of births, or putting women under the kind of pressures that we've seen. All of those are actually effectively forbidding the genocidal conduct.
Okay.
Which is, these are the specifics, apart from the starvation that's actually being practiced. And were Israel even to begin to meet those which it has a duty to under international, it's actually a party to this convention, it cannot have continued what it's doing, but it is continuing, and the Americans and the British are aiding and abetting it. And what is more, and this is repetition, in going against UNRWA on the flimsiest of grounds. An organization with 14,000 employees, many of them Palestinians, with rights of self-defense. It's an extraordinarily small number that they may or may not have found to be complicit in that act of national resistance, which happened on the 7th of October. But even were the numbers of them be much larger, it would still represent no basis on which the facilitators of the genocide, Britain, the US, Canada, is a whole list of countries that have withdrawn their funding, even temporarily, from UNRWA. And effectively, given what we were saying about how little food is going in, how the destruction of capacity to produce food, bakeries, and so on, had been done, that to hamper or cripple the one agency, official one, I mean, there's some other agencies in there, Doctors Without Borders and so on, is still there, and they've paid a heavy price. Whole heap of their people have been killed. So what it amounts to is that for Britain and the US to have gone down this road on the very flimsy evidence that the Israelis have prevented is the final, element of proof about their direct facilitation of the genocide. So not only have they provided the weaponry, but they are now preventing a UN agency supplying the food that will keep the people alive.
And of course, it's not only food that UNRWA provides. It's a range of services, essential services.
Absolutely,
education, health, food, social welfare.
But right now, in the circumstances in where the schools have been destroyed, where the universities have been destroyed, where the hospitals are under pressure, food and health material is absolutely crucial. And if you're stopping those, which they are, then it's directly facilitating the starvation and death and disease.
Definitely.
That will kill people.
Brother Leader, also, so just to say, so for those who may not be aware and maybe joining us late, UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency that operates in Gaza. It has about somewhere between over 12,000 employees, and 12 of said
in Gaza. 12
in Gaza, specifically in
Gaza, because they also function in the West Bank.
Point taken. 12,000 in Gaza. 12 of said employees were said to have taken part in the attacks in Israel on the 7th of October. Not only is that the case, however, but the Israeli news, the Times of Israel, has reported the story as 10%, i.e. 1,200 members of UNRWA have connections with Hamas. Yeah. That's how they've reported the story. In fact, I will read the headline directly for you right now.
Yes.
Israeli intel shows 10% of UNRWA workers have ties to terror group. Reports. And so the first paragraph, and we read this yesterday for those who tuned into our live show yesterday. Israeli intelligence assesses that some 10% of UNRWA employees in Gaza have ties to terror organization, in addition to at least 12 employees it says were involved in the October 7 terror onslaught in southern Israel, according to new report. Now, this is interesting. Remember now that Hamas is, in fact, oh, so your camera's gone black again. Can you hear us? Okay. Oh, so you made it to do what you did before and we don't come again.
There
okay.
is.
Okay. You're back. All right. Good. Yeah. So as we said, remember that Hamas is in fact the government. Yeah. In the elected government in Gaza. So technically the entire population has some kind of tie to Hamas. So it's a very ridiculous claim, yeah. But not only it should be noted, has the US and the UK withdrawn funds. Germany has withdrawn funds from UNRWA. Italy.
Let's not forget, Brother Shakaraz, the point has already been made that the Israeli government has historical connections and ties with
Hamas, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So technically, to say that 10% of UNRWA have ties with Hamas is ridiculous because they're the government. Yeah, in Gaza, it doesn't make any sense. All right. But I'm emphasizing the point that we're not just discussing US and Britain, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Finland, Australia, and Canada have all joined the campaign to withdraw funds from UNRWA, even as they either directly or indirectly fund or support Israel in what it is committing in Gaza as it stands at the moment. Yeah, I want to make that point very, very clear for our viewers so you understand exactly what is taking place. Now, what do yourselves want to say, Brother Leader Elder Cecil, about the timing of this announcement of UNRWA's apparent complicity in what took place on October the 7th? I guess the implications are obvious, but maybe I'm missing something. So what do you want to say about this UNRWA situation? And by the way, it should actually be said that this accusation has not been investigated by anybody. It's an accusation that has been levied by the Israeli government, and funds have been withdrawn on that basis alone. And this was announced on the 26th of January, which was the day that what I've just read out from the court finding, the court order, was due to be announced, yeah, and read. But go ahead.
Sorry, Elder, if I may, I did want to make a quick point about the ruling, if I may, and I'll be brief.
Go ahead, Rolly, go ahead.
That just to clarify,
yes,
because we know people are listening with various levels of understanding, and I'm not suggesting that my level of understanding is supreme, but I do my best to make sense of these things because they are important. Yes. Let it be known that the remit of this preliminary hearing, and I stress, this was a preliminary hearing.
Yes.
Into a case of genocide that the South African government brought against the Israeli government. Mm-hmm. And the remit of the court, as far as this preliminary hearing is concerned, was to establish if there was a plausible
possibility.
Mm-hmm. There was a plausible case of genocide. Is the case that South Africa has presented to the court, does it plausibly demonstrate that genocide could be being committed or is being committed in Gaza by Israel? And what the court decided was, it is a plausible case. In other words, there is a potential that genocide is being committed. The court could not go further than that.
Yes,
What that means at this stage, what that means is that the court decided that Israel has a case to answer. I think Elder Cecil used that term earlier on, and I want to illuminate that term because it's important.
No, it's important, very, very, very important. I will add the emphasis with the words of the order itself. It says, in the court's view, at least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel in Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the convention. Yeah, as in the Convention Against Committing Genocide. Okay?
And the convention is what I read out earlier on, the definition of genocide. Yeah. So the court has decided that that South Africa presented a plausible case. Yeah.
Yes.
And also importantly, that South Africa demonstrated intent to commit what is plausibly accepted by the court.
Oh yes.
And that South Africa had brought convincing evidence that a conspiracy, not just conspiracy, the incitement was also demonstrated in the South African government's case and accepted as having been so demonstrated by the South Africans. So it isn't just that the court accepted the plausibility of the claim that Israel is committing genocide, but it also accepted the factuality of the intent and the factuality of the incitement and the factuality of the conspiracy on evidence gleaned by South Africa and presented to the court.
Well, absolutely, because if you look back over the case, the president did read out the definition of genocide several times.
Several times
throughout the case. And obviously in the summing up, there were key points in which she made reference again to the definition of genocide. But I made that interjection because some people are confused about this and come away thinking the court did not uphold genocide.
Genocide, which they weren't supposed to at this stage.
Outside of the remit, but the potential of genocide. So what we need to understand is that the court is saying that this case, the presentation of this case raises a very serious question. It does appear, what the court is saying is it does appear that genocide is being committed. But of course, they can't establish that until the case is full trial. So now they're saying that it will be submitted to a full trial. Israel has a case to answer.
To be clear, brother leader, just so people know that full trial could take years.
It could take years, and hence the need for provisional emergency measures. And that's why the provisional measures have been put in, because there appears to be it appears to be a fact that genocide is taking place in Gaza by the actions of Israel. And just to crown the last couple of points that Elder Cecil made, as I said earlier on, the two main ingredients in this process is to establish the facts in terms of Israel's action. Do Israel's actions in themselves have the potential to amount to genocide or to effect genocide on the people of Gaza? The action itself needs to be examined, and then you have to prove intent. No intent, no genocide. So the court has embraced and accepted that there's evidence there that there is intent.
And not having researched this court at all, I think it's interesting whether on any previous occasion it's come up with provisional measures of this kind, which work in such a way, if followed by the accused party, that it would prevent them carrying on the measures that plausibly amount to what they're being accused of. So sorry.
Actually, I happen to tend to refer to this decision as a de facto ceasefire, call for ceasefire.
Yeah, that's effectively what I'm saying. So we're in agreement on that. And
it's just to illuminate that point, Elder Cecil. Just to illuminate that point. Yeah, that I tend to refer to it as a de facto ceasefire for the very reason you gave just now, which is that you cannot implement these measures. And as Naledi Pandor, the foreign minister of South Africa, as she also said, you cannot implement these measures without a ceasefire.
All right, my other brothers, I think we've emphasized the point. I think we've emphasized that point. Go ahead.
No,
go on.
We're not really disagreeing. I think we're amplifying the thing.
But
importantly, the provisional measures, if followed by Israel, would lead them to cease and desist from actions which, on the face of it, prima facie, confirm that the stuff that they have been shown to be intending to do and are being done would and must cease, because the specifics of the genocide read out by Brother Leader and to some extent by you, and certainly in the judgment that the leader of the court read out, is to stop the killing. It's to stop the multiple modes of bodily and mental harm, to stop destructive actions against this targeted population, and including preventing births in the population. And there are one or two other things. If Israel even began to take these provisional measures seriously, the genocide would cease, and this would cease. So even though there is no declaration as requested by the South Africans of a ceasefire, the court requires Israel to cease the genocide.
Absolutely.
To cease the genocidal conduct.
Absolutely. So those who are saying, and I've heard this being said, I've even heard it on our beloved Galaxy Radio, that insofar as the court did not find genocide per se, and insofar as the court did not order a ceasefire, South Africa lost the case.
Well, that's a complete misreading and misunderstanding of these extraordinary and very specific, entirely and directly related to the interior of the convention. And so anybody who thinks that Israel won and that South Africa lost either hasn't read or doesn't understand what the court actually did. And one of the things that interests me, and the last thing that I will say...
can I just throw in something very quickly, Elder? Very quickly.
I do want to move on. We have a whole time, So I do want to... There's a few issues.
Just in terms of that last point you made, Elder Cecil, sorry to interrupt you in your flow.
No, man, no props.
Or they have not heard the responses of the two heads of governments of South Africa, who is jubilant about the outcome of the case, and Israel, who is seething, who is angry. Netanyahu is spitting fire. So he's not happy with the outcome. And Ramaphosa, who is
I think it's important just to register that Israel has a double response. I saw and heard the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu say that they had won. And then went on to the condemnatory back.
No, it's true. They're being very diplomatic. They're being very diplomatic. So basically, what they're saying is that they're already their line of argument, which is also the line of argument I made to understand from the ad hoc judge that comes from Israel. That's basically we're already doing these things. Basically, that's their line. We're already abiding by.
Well, that's foolishness, because if they were
of
doing these things, the court wouldn't order them. The court wouldn't have to order them to do it.
Of course.
Frankly.
No, but the only point that's been made is that's their line of argument at the moment. That basically it's a non-issue because these measures are already being accounted for. But
if you look further, we find that's contradicted by other comments and statements that have been made.
Of course.
They're fronting as though they have won, but they are seething. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
They're angry because
there's a double mode of response, and one is to lie about having won because no ceasefire has been ordered, and the false claim that they're in fact already doing what these measures insist on doing. I don't know how they can claim not to be killing Gazans. I don't know how they can claim not to be inflicting mental and physical harm on this population. I don't know how they can claim on the physical evidence that's available to everybody, where 70-something like that % of the buildings and structures in Gaza have been flattened or damaged so that beyond human habitation. So
let us not forget, Elder Cecil, that 90% of warfare is propaganda, and so they're still fighting the propaganda war. This is
100%, which they're losing. But we're going to come on to that. My older brother, say, I love to say this, please, right? So I'm going to ask. Well, I'm gonna, because we've kind of dealt with the UNRWA situation sufficiently. I would imagine, right? So let's move on. I'm gonna ask one more question about the case or the court proceedings themselves, and then I want to just ask a couple questions concerning broader geopolitical implications. There's a couple questions in the chat, and then we're going to close. All right. The question I want to ask concerning the proceedings itself is regarding the Ugandan judge. Yeah. Who voted against every measure. Even the oh, 1 second.
I don't think we should waste too much time on her. I looked at her judgment, and what she
that's what I was going to ask.
What she says is that this is a matter that should be settled by diplomacy. And by the UN and all of those agencies, and it is wrong to take it to the court. That's the argument that she's made as far as so she hasn't bothered to look at whether the genocide is happening. She's effectively gone behind to the causes and said that this arises from stuff that should be settled in other quarters by other entities, and don't bring it to us, and I'm not for dealing with it. That's as I understand it, what she said. But I think your other stuff is more important than her.
No, 100%. I just wanted to put that on the record because it has been put out there by other outlets that the one judge that voted against all the motions is an African. Judge Julia Sebutinde, it's her name. All right. And such a beautiful African name as far as her family name is concerned.
Oh, she's authentically African.
No, of course, but I'm just saying though, when you hear African names like that, you would hope that there's African substance within the mind of the individual who holds such a name, but that's not always the case, you know. But the worst example of that is Mobutu.
So which name are you referring to, Brother Shakara? Julia?
No. I said family name. I said the family name. No, I said the family name.
Oh, you said the family name. I didn't hear.
I think Julia might be reflective of the mentality. Okay. So that's the hearing itself. I think you've emphasized the point in terms of the findings and the outcomes and who has won that particular case. Let's go into some broader implications. We've already touched on them in terms of UNRWA and the West and the fact that they continue to fund Israel whilst removing funding from a human rights organization operating in Gaza. From a Pan-African perspective now, and I have said this openly every time I've covered this issue.
Brother Shakara, sorry to interrupt you. Just to say the Ugandan government has separated itself from the way that Sebutinde voted.
This is true. This is true. Yeah. Now that is another example.
Notwithstanding all its contradictions,
And I was gonna. So what you just said is the basis upon which I'm gonna ask the next question now, because I'm right. So I've said this openly every time I've dealt with this issue on this platform about South Africa taking this case to the ICJ. Yeah. And what do we have to say as Pan-Africanists, brother leader Elder Cecil, about the fact that the South African government seems capable to act on principle in relation to the preservation and defense of the people of Gaza, but doesn't seem to act with the same principle in relation to its own citizens, indigenous Africans in the nation of South Africa on issues of land and human rights? I think that is a massive contradiction, and it's one that I personally can't overlook. What do we have to say about that as Pan-Africanists?
My own position is very simple. The South African government, which has brought this case, is a notorious, in my view, neo-colony that since it got independence, we've been in struggle against. Most notoriously Marikana, but there's lots of other terrible
I was going to mention that specifically.
Terrible stuff happening there. So none of that can come in the way of this particular matter. Our struggle against the South African government on political grounds must continue, and mine certainly has been suspended. And I find it perfectly easy to combine praising them for taking this action, which they have taken some rather well. It doesn't excuse their neo-colonial politics in any way, and that's long and short of that for me.
I understand. Brother Leader, any comments on this matter?
I totally agree with Elder Cecil. I got slapped up by Elder Cecil and Africa Speakers on Kebble and Umodre Monday evening, for using the term not neo-Nazi, neo-apartheid.
Yes.
That in effect, what we have in South Africa is a neo-apartheid regime, insofar as we use the term neocolonialism to depict the fact that we have, in essence, the perpetuation of the colonial system, a political and economic system that preserves the interests and promotes the interests of the former colonizers and imperialists, by government of people with black faces. And so there lies deception. And what we have in South Africa is that the overwhelming majority of the trappings of apartheid are still in place. The economic, the domination of land, they still own over 80% of the land. The white oppressors, they still dominate over 90% of the economy. African people are still oppressed economically, socially, politically in that country. And therefore, it's a new system with black faces preserving the interests of white oppressors who have run that apartheid system. 100%. So I have no great love for the South African government because of its failure to serve our people's interests as a matter of primacy. I have no love for them, but I totally agree with Elder Cecil that what they have undertaken in the ICJ is of tremendous importance in terms of international geopolitics. It is a massive blow to Israeli impunity that has been practiced for far too long. I do believe that Israel has a very destructive history as far as the African continent and African people are concerned, and
South Africa in particular,
Southern Africa.
True.
I know why you say South Africa in particular, but
no. But you're right. You're right to correct. You're right to correct. Yeah.
But Southern Africa, because the Zionist impact on Southern Africa, the Zionist impact is not only South Africa; it's Southern Africa. It's in
100%.
Zimbabwe. It's in Botswana. It's
Angola,
in Namibia,
Mozambique.
In Angola. It's in Mozambique. And they're all connected. You know, they're all connected. The Zionist Federation is a global entity. You know, the World Zionist Organization, the WZO, has its tentacles all over the world, and they're firmly established on the African continent. And they are doing damage, and their aim is to take control of Southern Africa again. And we need to know this.
Understood, leader. All right, so, give facts for that. I sorry, I get the impression that you want to add something here.
Yes, I do. I think that while we welcome the South African bringing the case and the outcome, it's important that we recognize that given the nature of the enemy, unethical white power, terrorism by another name, that power is showing itself capable of acting in the way that we historically know that it acts, but in the face of the most outrageous activity, it is still putting in the weapons to Israel. It's undermining Israel on the first or second day when the head of the UN said that this thing had a history. They went on the war path against the UN and that gentleman. So, and on no basis whatsoever, the main agency that's supposed to stop the people starving is being undermined, and by whom? Exactly by racist white terrorist Euro-American power. So this victory it's never Pyrrhic, but it might be empty, because the capacity to stop the genocide isn't there. It isn't in Africa. It isn't with the Palestinian people who keep fighting and keep
it's
losing.
Also not with
we need to focus on the power imbalance and the wickedness of the way in which white power is deploying its power in this instance.
Which is exactly where I was going to go. I was going to add that it's also not with the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice doesn't have enforcement capabilities when it makes judgments. It relies upon signatory states to do the enforcing via military intervention and or economic sanctions, etc. So we're going to come to that.
But just the point ought to be made, though, Brother Shakara, that the International Court of Justice is an arm of the United Nations.
It is, yes.
And the United Nations Security Council should see itself as having the responsibility to enforce the decision of its court, of its international.
100%. But what you just said.
Of course, we know that
the UN Security Council is led by all but two Western imperialist nations, right? And
three. France as well. France, Britain.
No. I'm saying all but two are Western imperialist nations. So China and Russia are
all but two. Okay.
Right. And I'm saying, right. But the point is that those are member states. And so it relies upon the member states to act as the enforcers within the situation. But we know that the member states are firmly in league with Israel for the most part. So we're going to come to that more directly in a second. Before we get there, though, it has been said, and I have heard it said, that one of the most significant things about this, at least on an optics level, is the fact that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, one could not have envisaged a quote-unquote third world nation in the quote-unquote global south bringing the case against one of the most powerful Western nations in the known universe, right? And so there is a suggestion, especially with the rise of BRICS, as an economic bloc, that this case and the fact that it has been successful represents a shift in relation to what Elder Sessa was saying in the global geopolitical order. And so, there's all kinds of talk about a bipolar world, as in a polar, a world that has two distinct power centers, and that we who are in the quote unquote global south or in the third world will be able to take advantage, if we are organized to do so, of this disparity where power is not centralized, so it's, you know, directly in the West, more specifically America. To what extent, as from a Pan-African perspective, should we be buying into that analysis? Does this case being taken by South Africa represent a rise in the power of African people and African nation states in the world?
Brother Leader, if you don't want to go first, I'll do it, but I'd like you to go first.
So, Tendai Mwari, I think that as Africans, we are just so far behind in the race of life, as Papa Garvey would put it, that I don't see that this gives us any great boost. It should have the potential so to do, but there is so much work that we have to do to preserve our own sovereignty and territorial integrity as a continent and as a global people. You take, for example, how these Jews and these Zionist Jews in particular, how they are organized and structured globally, and that's where their power comes from. Not least because they are backed by the international banking system. That does help, yeah. But
and sorry, military
and the military might of
NATO,
of America and NATO and whatever else have you. But Africa has so much potential. The Osagyefo, Kwame Nkrumah, had a vision of transforming the African continent into the #1 superpower within a generation. And if he was allowed to do that, Africa would be ruling the world today. We are a long, 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 long way away from that now. And so whilst I would say at best, having South Africa assume this role just give us a glimmer of our power potential as a continent. It just gives us a glimmer. But then, as we have already said, the role of the South African government is so fraught with contradictions, and they are serious contradictions. They're very, very serious contradictions. So there's a limit to which we can really, elevate them and heal them. We have to be very specific that we commend them. I don't even use the word praise. I say we commend them for what they have done in this particular instance, but it stops there. It stops there,
Yeah.
But we have to restore the vision and the black print of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the way and also the vision of his spirit and mission child, the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. The vision and the mission that he was on the African continent, the Pan-African vision, has to be restored. The revolutionary vision has to be restored. Otherwise, we are not going anywhere. So we can't get overexcited. We must not misread the present situation. See it for what it is. It's a resounding victory. It has wounded the integrity of Israel and all its supporters. Make no bones about that. That's a fact. But apart from that, I don't see that in and of itself empowers us a great deal of African people. As African people, we've got too much work to do.
Don't worry. Go ahead, El Cecil.
I don't want to deny that this case may represent a change, and it may even be of the nature and character that you say you're hearing some people say. I'm doubtful of the substance of the change, and I'm doubtful because we do need to look at our history in the post-war period, and not just at what our brother leader pointed to just now, but we need to remember that in 1954 or 55, there was something called the Bandung Conference. And that Africans and Asians appeared to have got together and to be setting an agenda and this and that and the next thing. We need to remember that in the following decade, Africa got about 30 extra allegedly independent countries. We need to remember that in the 70s, that Bandung Assembly got hold of the UN, the General Assembly, voted that Israel was a racist, fascist state, and passed a massive vote at the UN, which the US and the West got reversed. We need to remember that we effectively took over UNESCO, and that they came and took it back. That in the 70s we were talking about a new information order, a new this, a new that, and the next thing, and some of them were even put into place, and all of them have been undermined by Western power. We need to remember that we, through the UN, organized something called the Law of the Sea Convention. It actually has its headquarters in Jamaica. That's something where it was agreed internationally that the resources on the seabed belong to all of the people of the world. And that's what that entity is about. And it's been undermined by the US and the West that say, UNA can pass everything UNA want. We just, we'd even give you headquarters. And then the man who was running it was a nice brother from Africa who was a great Bob Marley fan and so on. So meeting him was a joy. But the Americans have said that we who have the capacity to access that stuff on the sea bottom are the ones to whom it belongs. Bugger what you've said in the UN. And so it goes on. Now, what is the biggest thing that's happening geopolitically? Let us leave aside Palestine for a moment. The West is setting up a war against China. The West is setting up a war against Iran. The liberals talk about obliterating Iran. What they're setting up against China includes giving Australia nuclear weapons. They don't talk about it because in submarines, but they're just in a world where they are against nuclear proliferation, given that country, Australia, a white country, nuclear weapons, just as they gave Israel and South Africa nuclear weapons in
Sorry, just don't forget your point, but just to say, Australia is a white country that recently voted against even recognized indigenous indigenous citizens.
No less racist than it has ever been. White country. So agreed. What is the case that they have against China? The only case that they have against China is that China is a non-white country that's in danger of becoming the leading country in the world. And that's the case.
It's beating them on a capitalist front. It's beating them.
That's what the West has against China. They're setting up India against China. They're setting up Japan against China. They forget that Japan invaded China and caused the death of something like 36 million Chinese in living memory. That stuff happened in the 30s, right? And so the idea that the world has changed and that South Africa taking this case is some really significant element or example of the change, seems to me not really to understand what is happening. And we mustn't blind ourselves to this notion that something called BRICS actually fundamentally matters. Not that it doesn't matter, but the power structures of the world look to me, the white ones intact. They seem to be reinforcing themselves and busy thinking through what they have to do and preparing to do it. And they have a lot of us working for them.
Yes. Give thanks, brother leader. So there's so much more that could be said on this. I do want to get to the questions from the chat though, so I can let you go. You've given a lot of your time this evening, so we give thanks. So let me get to a few questions in the chat, and then we'll conclude. Say Imhotep asked, "I'm so glad that I'm so glad to hear, the elders speak about Israel's lack of the right of self-defense. They are in an offensive posture." And that is correct. I think you raised that point yourself a couple of shows ago, Seth Imhotep. He also says a question that do the elders believe Western states who have withheld funding from UNRWA post ICJ ruling will be held liable if South Africa's ultimate case liable in South Africa's ultimate case at The Hague?
That's 10 years down the road. The Palestinians will all be dead.
Yeah, it's a good point.
What they're doing now in relation to UNRWA actually matters. It matters to whether the Palestinians live or die of starvation or not. And the way it's set, they are meant either for Egypt to open the border so they can escape or die in Palestine. That is what the Western humanitarians, the decent human beings that we're supposed to think of as decent, right? Gandhi said, when asked about Western civilization, he said it would be a good idea if it existed. I'm afraid it wouldn't be a good idea. So you misunderstood what we're facing, right? These are terrible, right? I used to be hesitant about all the Pan-African stuff that talked about them as ice people, and so it's absolutely true. That's how they are.
Elder Cecil, you really said that just now?
Yes. I mean,
you know we're recording this, right?
No, the evidence, right? And it matters. It matters that it's being organized by Jewish people who are supposed to know suffering. And did suffer at the hands of their fellow Europeans, all of them from the Jews around from Eastern Europe.
The Genocide Convention, as you know, Elder Cecil. The Genocide Convention, as you know, was born out of it came on the back of the Jewish Holocaust.
Yes. And
they were the first signatories to the convention.
Yeah, and effectively, right, what we're watching is we saw in our lifetime, certainly mine, 3 attempts at final solutions. One was directed against the Russians by the Germans. The other one was directed against the Jews by the Germans. And 70 years later, the Jews are pursuing a final solution program and plan against the Palestinian people. Where is the moral superiority in that? Where on what basis is one supposed to be able even to begin to respect the international Jewish covenantal community?
Yes.
It's extraordinary. It's horrible.
And
the fact that historically we knew them as enslavers, as manipulators of money on behalf of white money, and now we face them again. And what are they doing? Running a genocide in the face of world opinion. With the backing of people who look like them.
Did you just say Elder Cecil?
Them, because there's no difference between them and Western racist capitalism and Western racist whites. No difference.
Elder Cecil, did you just say that we knew the Jews as enslavers?
Yes.
Can you qualify that, please?
No. Right.
No, we know where that comes from. We don't have to have that history today. But
just on Jewish provided evidence, we know that the Jews went with the Portuguese to Brazil and set up really the first proper slave system in the Americas in Brazil. We know that Jews went with Hollandic forces to northern Brazil, captured part of that, learned how to do what the Portuguese were doing, and took it north into Suriname, and then out of northern South America into the Caribbean islands. It is the Jews who ran that, right?
Ran many of the shipping companies.
The historical evidence for that, you don't have to go to an Islamic source or a black source. It's there in the Jewish literature, which I have on my shelf.
No, real talk, honestly, real talk. You know what? If you want to see some real hostility though from these people, see how they respond to non-Zionist members of the Jewish community. It's mad. Yeah, it
seems to me, and we might get into trouble for this, but the fact that there are some non-Jewish or some non-Zionist and even anti-Zionist Jews doesn't matter, because the overwhelming majority of that community
100%.
are in favor of what they are doing in Israel. They support it. It wouldn't be happening otherwise. And they've got Jewish people well placed and Zionist people well placed, including Trump. Trump went to Israel in the final year when he was in office and said, we're moving our capital to Jerusalem. We are saying that the West Bank is no longer occupied but part of Israel. That East Jerusalem doesn't any longer exist as a whatever entity, and he set about, and it's still effectively working until the 7th of October. He set about bringing the Arabs to order, and the order he was bringing them to was to recognize and work with the Zionist Jews who were killing Palestinians and taking Palestinian lands as if the Palestinians were less than dogs. The Europeans don't do that to dogs.
True. Yeah, and we could have a whole another conversation about AIPAC, the Israeli lobby group in America, and their role.
The literature on that leaves no. Incidentally, like, I used to be a sociology student, so I went and looked at things like the Journal of Jewish Sociology, all of the stuff about what they do, how they take power in particular places, how they put into office people that they in their journals call gatekeepers and so on, and they name them. It's just that we're not supposed to see or say it.
Right.
But it's documented by them in their writing about themselves.
I understood that. Go ahead.
So just to say, AIPAC is the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee.
Yeah.
One of the most
very interesting organization. Yeah.
No, there are good books. There are good books on
lobby in the United States of America.
Israeli and Jewish lobby in the United States of America, and there are good books on Jewish power in the States.
Just as an example, just Google, just YouTube any of the last however many presidents, and the speeches that they make at AIPAC in the lead up to a presidential election.
Well, all of them have to appear before AIPAC. All of them have to be approved by AIPAC. And have to come before AIPAC before they can be before they are approved.
Right.
And there is something else that I think we have to have the courage to begin to understand. Somebody said, the President of the United States, that Israel is so important to the US that if Israel didn't exist, the US would have to invent it. And whole heap of nationalists and Marxists believe that is true. It's not actually true. What has happened is that Zionism has effectively captured capitalism, imperialism, and is getting it to do its bidding. Israel is not the military power that it presents itself as. It's actually a paper tiger. And the West runs the Middle East not through Israeli presence, but through what they backward and foolish Arab leadership does, and the distance that exists between them and their people. Arab people, the masses, are okay. The
Especially
Arab
Saudi
people
Arabia.
don't know their ass from their elbows in terms of so the West runs the Arab world not by having Israel dominating them, but yeah, and we have to think through and understand what is really happening there. Israel exists not because British imperialism made it possible between the Balfour Declaration in 1948, when the Jews turned on British power and blew them up and said they were doing a liberation, Mannequin, Begin, and all of that. Up until that point, British imperialism supported and killed Arabs on behalf of the Jews. After that, increasingly, American capitalism has taken on that role.
Yes.
When on the 7th of October, Hamas did its action. Incidentally, the way these things run is that every entity that's involved in genuine resistance to the West gets declared terrorist. So that I heard Harold Wilson call Joshua Nkomo a terrorist. The man who became a liberal prime minister of the UK, well named, the one who was just appointed foreign secretary. That man, while he was at Oxford or wherever he was, talked about Nelson
David
Mandela
Cameron
as a terrorist. Yeah, him, right? So it's important that we understand how things really stay. Now, on that day, when Israel, in order to facilitate settlement, left the Gaza border largely undefended, it's America that had to give them the weaponry and so on to conduct the war that they're presently, right? And their reputation for military efficiency and all that is an idiocy. They don't the Palestinian resistance is still firing rockets at them out of places that they can't spot, despite having been in Gaza for something that's approaching 3 months or whatever, and wrecking and killing. Yeah. So we need a different analysis of what is really happening, and it's important that the racist West, not really in its interest at all, economically, doesn't benefit in any way from supporting Israel. But the Zionists have control of them, and they get them to do it.
Yeah.
That's where I stand on that matter, and I believe it to be correct.
I hear you, Oluseso. Let me see. We've got 2 more comments, and we're going to wrap up. gotkushTV, it says, it may also be noteworthy that these measures do not make a distinction between civilians and militants in terms of those who they are causing harm to. I believe he's referring to the measures by the ICJ, that the measures within the court order does not make a distinction in terms of harm against civilians and harm against combatants in that regard. Is that significant?
No, it's not necessary for the court to have done that. And Israel's own approach invalidates any such distinction, because they say that in killing these thousands, now tens of thousands of Palestinians, what they're doing is hunting down and killing Hamas. So the genociders don't make that distinction. And the court, which is aware of it, and that's why it's talking about women, that's why it's talking about stopping births and so on. So the court's judgment actually is informed by that awareness, but in terms of stopping the genocide, it's not a line that it needs to pursue, and it quite rightly doesn't pursue it.
Okay, understood. All right, and finally, also noteworthy that Blinken and Biden have circumvented Congress to fund Israel. So yeah, which is not unusual. They tend to do that in America.
American presidents do that all the time when they are ready to do something that they want. But in relation to the US legislatures, the US president could get anything in relation to Israel through that Congress and through the House of Representatives, because it's completely under the control of the Jewish Zionist lobby.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I always push back against that, in the sense of the fact that I see Zionism in this regard as just an arm of Western imperialism in general. I don't see it as in control of it. I just see it as a part of it. And in just as much as Britain comes to the aid of America, America comes to the aid of Israel. And really, Israel wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Britain and America. You know what I'm saying? So
your latter point is true. Yeah.
Right. In respect to the fact of Israel being in control, I find it hard to believe that they're in control of Britain and America.
No, it's not Israel per se that is in control. It's the global Zionist movement backed by international bankers.
But that's what I'm saying. The global Zionist movement is just an aspect or a subdivision of the Western imperialist movement. They didn't create Western imperialism. They're just a part of it.
No, and nobody, and certainly not me, is arguing that Zionism and Jews created Western imperialism. So you haven't heard that from me, and I reject that as an argument. What I was saying, and I'm still saying, is that the belief shared by some nationalists, some Marxists, and by President Biden is that Israel and Israel's presence and role in the Middle East is essential to America's role there, and that I dispute. I think it's against the evidence, and what has happened on your father's account of the history and mine is that the Zionist movement persuaded a fading imperialism, the British, to set up
act on their behalf.
That at that time, Zionism was a minority tendency within Judaism. Since then, it's become, but overwhelmingly, the majority tendency within Judaism. Since then, not only do they have the kind of influence and power in Britain that allowed the British foreign secretary to set up Israel when he shouldn't have, and when he knew and said in that declaration that he shouldn't have. But we've arrived at the situation because of how well organized Zionism and Jewry is inside of the United States of America, that they can get America to do objectively anti-American stuff. What is it that America benefits from putting all of that money annually into Israel? How does America benefit from that? What is it? How is it exactly that America benefits from the 14 plus billion that they put in
since
this war? When, as it happens, by their relationship with the reactionary existing Arab leadership, they have full control of the resources of that area. They have full control, military. They shoot them down when they step out of line of the people of the Arab world. Egypt,
Saudi Arabia,
and so it's a myth that anyway.
No. I take your point. And if we had more time, we'd go into.
Well, we must go back and discuss it one of these.
The Arab world in terms of why there's not more of an uproar, an upheaval in the Arab world on issues such as Gaza.
On Gaza, let me interrupt you. I think that the weakness and idiocy of the Arab leadership has never been more clearly demonstrated than in this moment. They were outmaneuvered left, right, and center. At the point at which the Americans, this is on the second day of the encounter, the American president went to Israel and proceeded to arm Israel publicly in the way that he did. The Arab world should have stopped talking to the Americans. They should have said, we're not talking to you until you desist from the stuff that you're aiding Israel in doing. Instead of that, one of their countries gets alleged kudos from negotiating a few days prior.
Dubai.
They allow the US to get away with vetoing a ceasefire resolution. And then they allow through the Security Council a resolution that effectively approves of what Israel is doing. On the promise that somewhere down the road, Israel is abiding by international law, and somewhere down the road, there's going to be pauses for humanitarian. And America got all of that past the Arabs and past us too.
Yeah, there's so many dynamics here because we don't know. Say the Houthi them fire 2 rocket on the trade ship them. There's also even the issue of Israel's recent attempts to get observer status at the AU. Which is another a whole next dynamic in this situation. And at that time as well, it was South Africa who raised the loudest voice of rejection.
Their foreign minister has been on talking about that very recently.
Whilst Paul Kagame in Rwanda was the agent of trying to facilitate that particular inclusion. I think though the issue to kind of get to where you're going now, when I humbly submit as we approach the close, what America gains is increased power. The expansionist nature of imperialism as a political trajectory and capitalism as an economic philosophy requires expansion to a significant degree, out into the universe, in fact. And the essential thing that they need is power and influence over how the world is governed. And Israel as it stands is just an outpost, you know what I'm saying, in that regard.
But with respect, isn't that to some extent dangerously formulaic? What is Israel? It's the last white settler colony. The white world discovered a long time ago that it doesn't need them, which is why, resisted by natives, Africans, Asians, whatever, they've left them and are running the world in a different way. And they're actually running the Middle East in the way that they run Africa and most of Asia and so on, via neocolonial structures where local leadership...
I hear you. So at the same time, the Arabs are Arabs, and the Israelis are European. That's another dynamic.
So it's Israel is an aberration, and it's only allowed to exist because of the hold that Zionists and Jews have in relation to policy and action by the countries that support them. The countries that support them get nothing out of it.
No, I hear you, Olusegun. I'm just saying that there must be a logic, and I'm saying I think that's where it lies. I'm not denying that it's formulaic, but it's the only thing that makes sense based upon what you're saying, right? If they're not getting anything materially out of it and so on and so forth, right? There must be a reason. There's a logic behind it, and part of the logic as well was the fact that the Israeli state comes up in the region in the midst of the Cold War, where exerting and having influence in that kind of way was key political capital. So yeah.
It's this is something that I would like us to debate. And
Yes,
you've stated a position. I've stated one. Actually,
no, that's fine.
I
That's fine.
think that mine's at least it's not the popular position, and so I think we actually need time.
So whenever
time for the dynamics, but it's important that we understand.
100%.
America gained nothing in the Cold War from having Israel in there alienating Arabs.
Yeah. Point taken.
Can I just say that perhaps the answer is in understanding the global dynamics of the world in which we live and who really controls the world. And it's a global power elite.
Yes.
A plutocracy at the helm of which is the banking system.
Yes.
And who are these bankers? These are the same bankers who in the late 1800s formulated the Zionist movement. And that Zionist movement carries a great deal of power. We see the power that it wields throughout the European world presently. I think we need to understand that power dynamic. If we go back to the Balfour Declaration and the letter that Arthur Balfour wrote to Lord Rothschild, who was the head of the Jewish community here in the UK and one of the heads of, as I said earlier on, the Zionist Federation of Britain and Ireland here in the UK. What was the promise? What was one of the promises that the Zionist movement was able to make to the British government? If you back us in stealing Palestine, we can guarantee you that we can bring America into the war. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they did. The Balfour Declaration was signed on the 2nd of November in 1917. America entered the war because the Zionists directed it to do so. America entered the war in December of the same year. So that gives us an indication of the power of the Zionist movement. The issue of who really runs this world, who really controls, who really run things in this world. And we better understand that there is a de facto government, global government, a de facto world government that we need to understand. It's not America, it's not Britain. In fact, these are entities that they use. These are political entities that they use to effect their will. And evidently, Israel, for whatever reason that we may or may not understand, Israel is a political entity that enables this global power elite to effect their will.
All right. You know, like I said, there's so much we can say on that, but I'm gonna go to this last question from the chat.
Clearly a subject for future debate, but I sense Elder Cecil wants to say something.
No. I'm happy just to say, let us debate these matters in some early exchange.
If I have a difference of point of view from my elders, I always bring it with humility and knowing that I will learn from you both. So that's not a problem.
There are matters that are worth discussing, debating, dialoguing. You know, it's very important. The issue of who really controls the world in which we live is
the point I'm making is that I think to say Zionist is to let the British and the Americans and the Germans and the French off the hook slightly, right? You see what I'm saying? I think the Zionist.
I think that what we should do is agree to discuss those matters on some future occasion. Right. I think we should take the final question, I
Point
have to go
taken.
because I have some domestic matters and family matters
yeah.
to attend to.
Yes, I point taken. Elder
Yeah.
Cecil.
And I agree with Elder Cecil. But Chakara, if you could just repeat what you said just now so I can hear it.
No, I'm just saying. Sorry, what I was saying is that I think to make it, we could be in danger, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is what you're saying, but we could be in danger of making the answer to the question Zionists, and I think that would let the British, the what's it called, the Americans, the French, the Germans, etc., off the hook slightly.
No, it doesn't. But we're going to have future discussions.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
And I'll tell you what, it doesn't get them off the hook at all.
Yeah, but except for the fact that I understand all of them can be Zionists. Just what I'm saying. But I'm saying that I see Zionism in the context of Western imperialism and not the other way around. That's what I'm saying. But anyway, another touch for another time. The last question, Gotkush, how do the elders envision the region looking at the end of the conflict? That's a big question. How do the elders envision the region looking at the end of the conflict?
There's only one issue, you know, how soon Israel will stop the genocide. And the forces operating to make that happen are very weak in relation to the determination and the wickedness of the forces that are carrying it out and facilitating it. And the Palestinian people are in grave danger. And I don't know how it will end, and all envisioning of how it might end doesn't appear to be in the interest of the Palestinian people.
Tendai Mwari, I would say that the world is in great danger. I would say that in that context, Africa is in great danger because Africa is the prize of the world. Whoever controls Africa rules the world. I am quite clear that there is a plan that is called, there's a plan afoot that is called the Greater Israel Plan. And that Greater Israel Plan is to wipe out the Palestinians from that enclave and wipe out the Palestinians from the West Bank, which is something that is well on the way, even though it is not flagged up as much in the media presently. But the Palestinians, sorry, the Israelis are moving into the West Bank. They're killing Palestinians in the West Bank like nobody's business. And they're setting up more and more settlements in that crazy configuration that we can talk about another time, where they have Zone A, Zone B, Zone C. Elder Cecil, you know what I'm talking about. That has the Israelis actually effectively controlling over 80% of the West Bank, over 80%. It beggars belief, but that is the plan. And I fear that if that plan is allowed to succeed and the Greater Israel Project comes to fruition, the Greater Israel Project will seek to expand itself into Jordan, and other parts of the Arab world. And it won't be too long before it will impact on the African continent. In fact, the plan is to shed its refugees onto the African continent. We know that the Israeli government presently is speaking to certain African governments to take refugees from Palestine. Yeah, and that is not a good sign for Africa at all. Israel is also trying to get a foot in on the African continent politically and economically. It has been trying to get observer status in the AU. That has been blocked and opposed by South Africa, which is another thing I applaud them for. If that happens, woe betide us, because Israel has always been an inimical force on the African continent. If we see that happen, we will see the southern region of Africa. We will see the Zionists and white supremacists in the southern region of Africa who commandeer a lot of power, a lot of wealth, a lot of land, we will see them coming into their own. They represent a very, very dangerous force on the African continent. This is no joke. It is important for us as African people that Israel does not win this battle. But when we talk about Israel, we're not just talking about a tiny country in the so-called Middle East. We're talking about a global power elite that has established this project to fulfill its own purposes, its own globalist purposes. That is for another time. I suspect we're closing, so I will close with, as I always do, with the words of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey. We must always, African people, get back to the fundamental question about how do we empower ourselves? How do we unite the African continent? How do we revolutionize the African continent so that we become the #1 superpower on the planet, so we can rule the planet righteously and justly? So I close with the words of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey, who says, "Unite, organize now or perish. Rise, you mighty African people, for you can accomplish whatever you will. Rumbid Sokunamwari ye Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory."
Tenamwari. So I'm inclined to give you a last word if you want it, but don't feel obliged to take it.
No, it's fine. I'm really happy to have been in with you and your father this evening and to have had this conversation, and I hope to continue it sometime soon on these matters we've left with us
on the table.
Slightly different positions, but in the
it's slightly different.
The general correct Pan-African direction.
100%, and I could say more in terms of the moral compass issue as well. I think that's the primary thing that the state of Israel provides the West, is a moral compass and a moral justification for acting in certain kind of ways, which they need in a world
that compass broke up now.
No, but you remember, we've already made the point, that it was their response to acting in the interest of the Zionists that gave them the credibility in the world stage to act as the arbiters of human rights and so on and so forth. It's very important politically, right? In a world whereby they were still colonizing half the planet, right? So yeah, but that's another subject for another time, as you've already said. You know what I mean?
I'm very interested in that topic too, and if I might ask Brother Leader something. Are you aware that in that quote that you gave and always give from Marcus Messiah Garvey, you changed the word race to people?
No, I'm not. I'm not aware of a matter that I would say is not entirely correct, because Papa Garvey used both expressions. He said,
in that quote,
"Up you mighty race." Up you mighty race. He used that term, "up you mighty race." But he also said, "Rise, you mighty people."
Yes, I don't say that he doesn't use the word people. I just say that in that quote, I think it's race rather than people. And
we to emphasize race.
The extent to which us Africans have fallen in with the white, and I'm not talking about you, Brother Leader, but us generally, have fallen in with the white world's claim that race doesn't exist, even as they continue to be to be racist, and to come up with this notion that race is merely, in inverted commas, incidentally, merely a construct, a social construct. It's been an extraordinary ideological achievement of the West in the post-war period, and we need to be aware that they've achieved this and not fall for it and so on.
Fully aware of that, and the Al-Keblan revivalist movement is not averse to using the term race. We are a race-first, nationalist, Pan-Africanist,
thank you,
Garveyite movement. So you know that fully. But there's a particular reason why we say rise, you mighty people, and sometimes we say rise, you mighty African people, and why we stress the peoplehood and peopledom. But that might be another subject for another time.
I know where you stand on race, and that's why I'm interested in the fact that inside of that quote it says where Garvey said race, somehow people have drifted into that.
Well, as I said, Papa Garvey also said people. He said those
all right. Let's come back to the fact. Let's come back to the fact.
He use it interchangeably. So
all right, we'll have a whole discussion on the finer points of Papa Garvey's nomenclature. At another point. All right, giving thanks, Elder Cecil, giving thanks, Brother Leader, for the an informative conversation.
For
people,
always go to share platform with Elder Cecil.
100%. All right, I'm gonna let you both go as I close out the show, but give thanks for your contributions today.
Thank you for having me, my brother.
And great effort again, Shakara. Good work.
Give thanks.
Yes.
Till that worry.
All right, brothers and sisters. The show is about to conclude. I'm gonna wrap up the show very quickly. Right. So just to say, brothers and sisters, I'm quite lenient, when it comes to live conversations for the most part. And what goes on in the chat. I don't mind vigorous debate. I don't even mind a little insult here and there, but there's certain things, and I'm not going to go into no details about this, but there's certain things that I'm not going to condone. And I've made reference to that in the chat, and I would encourage those who are guilty of such offenses to take heed, because as I've said, further infringements will result in blocking and or timeout, depending. We're not counting on certain things, and so I'm not trying to convince nobody, but just heed what has been said, and make it known. All right. I want to let you know, for those of us who are in the UK, about the Shumida that is being hosted by the Al-Qaeda Revivalist Movement in honor of Omowale Malcolm X. I have the honor of delivering the message at this particular Shumida. Every first Sunday of the month, it's our spiritual worship, and we are honoring the life and legacy of the eminent prophet and King Omowale Malcolm X, and the message is entitled Omowale and the Vision of Freedom. I do encourage you to come along and share it with us as we drink from the wellspring of such an illustrious legacy. And let us also let you know and keep you up to date with the fact that we have a new show coming to gotkushTV in the coming months.
Democracy, crazy demonstration of grace, crazy demonstration. If it no be crazy, why for Africa?
Yes, indeed, kings and queens. Ghana, democracy under fire. Democracy under fire. Democracy under fire. We're going to be looking at Ghana politics in the lead up to the Ghana election. And so I'll be joined by my big brother Bonchi Anyete over there in Accra on a monthly basis to break it down for us. I promise you that is going to be a very, very, powerful and informative show. All right. And yeah, so we're going to wrap up the show, kings and queens. We are going to wrap up the show. Give me some black power fists in the chat, family. Give me some black power fists in the chat if you learned something, gained something inspirational and informational from today's show. That's what I want to show some love to Elder Cecil and Brother Leader before we close out. Let them know so you learned something. I just want to see, who are tuning in and all these things, and whether we're providing good quality content and analysis from a Pan-African perspective. So do feel free to drop the black power fist in the chat if you learned something and got some information and inspiration from today's show. Shout out to the infringer of policy. You know what I'm saying? All right, I'm on no. So once it happens, then all right, I'm very, very lenient, but once you abuse the thing, then we have to know how to behave. All right, so don't take advantage of the situation. Other thing going on, giving thanks, Kushti in the building. You don't know, I always feel good when you listen, Kushti. True, you don't know. Bigging up Say Imhotep, bigging up Nature, and you don't know. Bigging up all the silent listeners and the people them that know that they got something and gained something, but are too begrudging to put a black power face in the chat. I see you too. And we want to thank you and encourage you to continue to contribute and listen and view gotkushTV in our development through this year with them call 2024. And with that, I say to you, Tendai Mwari, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Munzima Mokoro. Give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Democracy, crazy democracy, demonstration of grace, crazy demonstration. If it no be crazy, why for Africa?
Why are we all of a sudden having crisis in identity? At the very moment, we also talked about what? Afrocentrism and African what? Centeredness. So right at this moment, when we are beginning to coalesce and to develop a concept of African identity and Afrocentrism, we are all now suddenly in a what? Identity crisis. Is the identity crisis really there, or is what going on an attempt to do what? Create an identity crisis? Because these people are well aware of what a full and wholesome identity will do to them. And they are aware that an African-centered identity represents the end of white power and of white oppression.
Mina bakabusi nengre mefele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre mefele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre mefele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina bakabusi nengre mefele sama. Mina bakabusi nengre mine pele obiama. Mina